pool of RPGs to choose from is rather limited, and my fanboy is definitely going to start showing right now. But for my number one, I'm going to have to go with Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. That game was amazing. I loved everything about it.
Thank you for using that, because that was one of the ones that made me like half want to stab myself for not including it, but go on.
Yeah, no, that one, it was fantastic. The characters were great. I cared about every single character, and at the end when Bastila was kidnapped, I was fucking seething with rage. And then the twist, where you know, spoiler alert, it turns out that you're the bad guy that went missing years ago, and it's like, holy shit.
You said it.
Yeah, probably one of the greatest twists in gaming history. It was amazing.
It was spectacular. I loved everything about that game.
See, and what's also interesting about the Knights of the Republic is it came out during the time that the new trilogy was in the theaters and still getting stuff. And what I remember playing that game all the way through and telling everybody I knew, it was like, what the fuck happened to George Lucas? The new trilogy out there right now, the game that actually is getting all the Star Wars elements right, or actually the story getting all the Star Wars elements right, is a fucking video game.
Right.
In a world that takes place before
like
the original
4,000 years before
universe.
the original.
Because everything that made the original Star Wars good, this game hit on in the storyline. And
they nailed it. They nailed the lore. They got everything.
Yeah. And then it also kind of brought up some great questions, because when that twist happened, like, you know that Saw music, that violin doo-doo-doo?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sitting there like you could film me as my mouth slowly dropped and the epicness had begun.
That's definitely one thing I can say about like just about every Star Wars game is the scoring is always fantastic.
Absolutely. I should mention, I just wanted to say this, I could have gone on for believing ever. There was nothing better than walking around at night. I found it kind of therapeutic, looking up at the stars and the nice music that they played in between the battles. I loved it.
Yeah.
But they kind of brought up those questions in Knights of the Republic of, you know, what defines you, because you could make that, you know, yes, you were the evil bad guy. Mm-hmm. And now you've lost some of your memory. Like, who are you now? Even when you regain it, are you this bad guy? Are you this good guy?
What or are you redefined by your new experience?
Redefined by your new experience? Yeah. Have you changed? And I mean, what does that say about you and, you know, existence in itself? Which that's another philosophy.
And also, Knights of the Republic, if I remember correctly, was one of the very first big titles to introduce the good and evil aspect of where your choices matter.
Yeah.
Which Oblivion didn't have nearly as much or as impactful in some ways. It did have it though, but yeah, they did that right.
Yeah.
And it was, like I said, I think it was one of the first games that did it. Knights of the Republic was one of the very first games that introduced the good and evil aspects of you being able to make choices and actually having a good and evil.
The first one I recall, at least.
Yeah, me too.
The first one.
The first one that was truly perfect. That blew you away by it, and you really saw the impact. Go through the entire game and really made changes, you know.
And then Old Republic 2, such a disappointment.
Well, because it wasn't handled by the same people.
Why does everyone always got to say that? Come on.
But it
had it. Okay, maybe some of the things, but its storyline itself, while of course didn't have that, you know, twist ending, that wild factor. Like, oh my god, I was that guy, the guy. The epicness. It did have this, you know, unexplored storyline that most people don't know about. I mean, I'm a fan of Star Wars. I've got some friends who've read every book there is, but I haven't because I have a life. In any case, that unexplored territory of what really is the Force, you know, her questioning what it is, and then finding you and defining you as the whole in the Force. You are the death of the Force while he was able to wield it once again.
The game would have been awesome if they'd actually explored that.
Hey, there weren't answers. Probably the reason they weren't answers is the reality is there may not be full answers to that yet in the universe. I don't know the books that well. I don't know how much studying was done into it. I'm sure plenty. But it was cool to kind of touch on that, and at that end, that was kind of her motivation, her plot.
Well, the other thing is, like, with that one, the ending just felt really abrupt.
Yeah.
And the last battle didn't feel as climactic as the first one. I mean, it was, in my opinion, the second one was a very good game. And but it definitely did not live up to the
that's why I said compared to the first one, the second one was such a disappointment.
But it did introduce a lot of really cool things that the first one would have
introduced a few interesting concepts.
Force Crush was awesome.
Yeah, I'll give you that.
I'm gonna pick you up and slam you to the ground.
All right, so now I guess I'm gonna get my number one pick, and being that I grew up around the SNES age and all of that, it's actually the very first RPG I really got my hands on, and then later explored the rest of it. And that's Final Fantasy VI. or also known in America as Final Fantasy III. In my opinion, it was...
And more rage from Soto.
Yeah, it's okay, Soto, because in my opinion, this was... Yeah, you mentioned Final Fantasy VII. Thinking back on it, the only Final Fantasy I ever liked was 6. It actually did enjoy.
I think Soto is trying not to reach across the table.
I don't want to speak over the mic.
No, it's okay. No, because I mean, this game introduced a lot of things to me. I remember watching my uncle play this game when I was about maybe 8, and begging him to let me play, and I finally did, and introduced me to all the storylines of it. And still, I can go back to this game and play it and enjoy it, because it was before all these concepts became cliched and generic, and because the main character for one was a girl, and she wasn't overly active, and she actually had a personality. She was part of a rebellion. And this game pretty much was about a group of rebellions trying to overthrow a imperial dictatorship that was trying to ruin the world. And the surprising part of it is that you didn't succeed. You actually didn't succeed. But in the middle of the game, you actually end up losing the battle. The dictator dies, and the guy who takes over it is a crazy psycho killer who ends up pretty much defeating you and almost destroying the world. By the second half of the game, you're in this world that's been pretty much destroyed. All the technology that was there, civilization has been torn apart and destroyed, and the rest of the game is pretty much you just trying to take him down and get any resemblance of society back. And no game has ever captured that sort of defeat, but I mean, in the second half of the game, I felt like, what the hell just happened?
There are some games out there that have captured defeat pretty well. Has anyone played, Okay, wow. Oh, whoa, this is terrible. The Darkness.
The Darkness was fun.
Yeah.
The ending, though. I'm just speaking...
I never got to the ending.
Personally, I love The Darkness. I mean, a lot of people didn't. I thought it was awesome. The ending's the definition of defeat. Your character... Well, you can say he got his vengeance, but he is totally defeated at the end. It was a very... I mean, if you felt like the guy's sad ending, but... You know what probably makes me the most angry right now?
What's that?
Of all of us in the top 3, we said Final Fantasy games twice. That's because you know what?
It's fun.
Final Fantasy 6. I played some of it. I can't say I hate it as much as 7. It wasn't that bad. I guess for that age and that style, as though I hate it. But yeah, storyline-wise, compared to the other Final Fantasies, doing all this spiritual 17-year-old saving ridiculousness that goes on, it was a lot better. I'll give you that.
And it was one of the... I think from my memory, it's the only Final Fantasy that actually didn't have a teenager at all throughout the game. These were actually hardened people that had been beaten down and were trying to rebel and get together and actually try to save their version of society.
It's the only reason I haven't jumped across this table and started choking you. I'm sure I would get hit over the head with this mannequin sitting to my right.
Then that would be Morrow. Morrow, how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Okay. But yeah, and I do agree with you that Final Fantasy, in my opinion, as an entire franchise, does piss me off.
Yeah,
I didn't like Final Fantasy VII. I didn't like Final Fantasy VIII. I didn't like Final Fantasy IX. Well, I could actually go back. I did like Final Fantasy when I originally played it, but I cannot go back and play it now.
Oh yeah,
I can't.
Not.
Final Fantasy VI I can, because it didn't do anything else that the other Final Fantasies did. The only thing in similarity it had is the fact that it used sprites and it had turn-based system. That was virtually it. But otherwise, the rest of it was this very mature storyline that, I mean, and it had that, like I said, its own twist. It was one of the very first games that actually twist on me, to where, I mean, you didn't save shit by the end of it. I mean, by the end of it, you're just trying to get rid of this guy whose entire reason to exist is to kill everything. That's all he wanted to do, was kill everything.
He question his forethought with that.
Right. What's he gonna do after? Really?
Classic. So what do you plan on doing once this is done?
I don't think he had any thought of that.
Disneyland? I don't know.
He just found that sort of thing fun. Was his entire, and then if you played through it, his whole introduction is to the Emperor when the Emperor was still around. He was used as the person to go and just kill things. He killed other rulers. He was used to go out in military tactics and just, I mean, they used him as an assassin and a plan. He planned assassinations and big takeovers. That was his entire job, and he ends up killing the imperial ruler and taking over and destroying virtually everything.
Well, hearing this, I will say perhaps I should revisit 6. I'm not going to. Perhaps I should.
Touch a Final Fantasy game.
Because not only would I have to touch it, but I would have to waste more of my life on something like. Well, I'm not saying this is bad. I didn't beat it. I played probably a good 15 hours of it because I have never bought a Final Fantasy game in my life. It was at my friend's house, so I didn't play it. But yeah, I will say maybe it is not a bad game. Maybe it is a good game.
I mean, Final Fantasy VI was the whole reason I even bothered to continue with the Final Fantasy franchise because I wanted them to hit that again. It was the very first RPG I played, and it was still, in my opinion, one of the best when it came to the way it developed its story. And the Final Fantasy franchise pretty much lived off of that, and again lived off of 7 because that's when I guess the world went into depression and they really needed their emo hero in the I really don't.
After 8, I played 10 minutes of 8, and that's where I stopped paying any attention.
You know what? I
was
was gonna say that's got to be maybe a little gift from somebody up above. But I always thought that was funny. I remember watching a documentary on the developers and the first Final Fantasy. The reason they called it Final Fantasy,
it was supposed to be the final game.
It was their final game because they were going under and they didn't think they were going to succeed, and that game revived them. And since that, they've become a huge corporation.
Yeah,
godly.
because before that they were pretty much putting out racing games.
Yeah,
I think their biggest franchise before that was Ridge Racer.